Okay, so for the strategy presentation, I chose the Pumpkin Book by Gail Gibbons, and I would do this in like a third grade classroom because in the third grade science standards, that's when they start to talk about plant and animal life cycles. So I thought this would be a good pick. So I'm gonna go ahead and start reading a little bit of it. So I picked The Pumpkin Book by Gail Gibbons. Pumpkins come in all shapes and sizes. Okay. Pumpkins are members of the squash family. There are many different kinds of pumpkins. Small pumpkins, big pumpkins, round pumpkins, tall pumpkins. Gardeners and farmers call them pumpkin varieties. Some pumpkins have a smooth skin and others have lots of bumps. In the springtime, when the sun's rays begin to warm the soil, it is planting time. Some gardeners turn the soil to get it ready to plant small pumpkin patches. A pumpkin patch is where pumpkins are grown. Some farmers use their plows to slice through and turn over the dirt. The field will eventually be a huge pumpkin patch. So I could stop here and ask the students, have you ever seen a pumpkin patch or been to a pumpkin patch, and just get them thinking about the pumpkin a little bit. The soil is ready. It is time to plant the pumpkin seeds. The beginning of a pumpkin is curled up inside each pumpkin seed. The food is stored there too. The pumpkin seed has a seed coat on the outside to protect it. The bigger the seed, the bigger the variety of pumpkin that will grow. Sometimes pumpkin seeds are planted in rows. Other times, they are planted in small circular areas called hills. Several shallow holes are poked into the hill, and one pumpkin seed is dropped into each hole and covered with dirt. Each hill should be about 3 feet to 6 feet apart to give pumpkins lots of room to grow. The pumpkin seed won't sprout until the dirt is warm and water has soaked the seed to soften its coat. Once the seed coat breaks open, the root begins to grow down into the soil. It takes in water and minerals from the soil for food. After about 1 week, 2 leaves appear. Each pumpkin seed is planted. Where each pumpkin seed is planted, these smooth leaves are called seed leaves. They begin to make more food for the plant from the sunlight and air. After a few days, a small pumpkin vine appears. These leaves look very different. They are prickly and have tough, jagged edges. More new vine leaves grow. Stems begin to grow and twist, crawling along the ground as they become vines. The vine grows thicker and thicker. They grow curly tendrils that wrap themselves around other parts of the plant to spread the vines. Gold-colored flowers begin to bloom. This part talks about pollination, and I think I would probably preface that a little bit before, and rather than just reading it, because there's a lot of bigger vocabulary words in that, and so I would probably preface that first. So over time, then I would probably skip over to here when it starts talking about the pumpkins start growing and how it becomes bigger and bigger, and the pumpkin turns from green to orange, and all of the pumpkins in the patch will soon become orange. So then in the fall, when the vines begin to dry up and dry, it is harvest time. It usually takes 80 to 120 days, depending on the variety of a seed, to grow into a ripened pumpkin. It is ready to pick if it feels hard on the outside and sounds hollow when tapped. Often shears are used to clip the pumpkin from their vines, leaving about 3 inches of the stem. The stem helps to keep the harvested pumpkin from getting moldy. So I would stop right here in the book probably, and I would continue later before too much information starts. But basically, the rest of the book goes on to talk about how there are all different shapes and sizes of pumpkins, and people take them to fairs and they weigh them, and how you can use different pumpkin things at Thanksgiving time, like pumpkin pie or pumpkin roll. And then it goes back to Halloween and talks about why pumpkins are used for jack-o'-lanterns as Halloween, and how to cut them, and use the seeds and to decorate them. And so it goes into a lot of other just fun stuff about pumpkins, but I would stop with the life cycle stuff. And then I would move into the activity for the students, and especially for life cycles, I think that can get pretty confusing if there's not a visual representing each stage of the life cycle. So the first thing that came to my mind was doing a graphic organizer in a circular manner, because it's showing its repetitive, how it is always in a cycle and it's always repeating. And so I think this would be a really good visual for the students to see that it's always repeating. So in my own, I tried to make this as easy as possible for them, just them putting the main ideas, what's happening at each stage of the life cycle, so that way it's not, and maybe if I had a different one or pictures, I would put pictures in the box as well to help the students see this a little bit better rather than just being words. So in the first box at the top here, I put that they're plowing the soil, and so this basically is just meaning that they're getting the fields ready to plant for the pumpkin patch. The next box right here, I put they plant seeds. So then I put the information about, I would want the students to know how they're planting the seeds. So the book said that they plant them in rows or in hills, and they drop the seeds in holes, and then they make sure to cover it with dirt so that way the seed is protected. Then in this arrow right here, you can see it right there. So it says 1 week in the arrow because I want the arrows to show some sort of timeline for the students. And so I put 1 week, and that's when the pumpkin begins to sprout. So the 2 leaves appear from the dirt, and those seed leaves is what they're called. They make food for the plant. So then in the next arrow right here, I don't know if you can see that, but it says 80 to 120 days. That's a huge range, but that's what the book said, and that's the time that the pumpkin is still in the sprouting stage. It's still growing. So 80 to 120 days later, they are able to pull the stem. So then some tips about finding a good pumpkin. If the pumpkin feels hard, if it sounds hollow when you're tapping it or something, and then making sure that you're leaving 3 inches of the stem when you pull the pumpkin. So I think this graphic organizer would really help the students because I put time in here, and it shows each stage, and I would definitely want to like try to add pictures maybe, but I think this is a good start. So going to the research aspect of the graphic organizer now. So first of all, in our textbook, it talks about how graphic organizers are used to increase students' comprehension. So it provides a framework for organizing information. So clearly this is, you're taking the main idea from each part of the pumpkin life cycle, and you're putting it in a small box to help organize the information. And it also clarifies the relationships and the connections after reading. So they can read about it and they're listening and they're seeing the pictures, but also it's allowing them to make their own connections, you know, whatever those connections might be when they're writing it out or drawing it. There are different connections that can be made. And according to Scholastic as well, Scholastic says that it helps students construct meaning of the text. So, like I said, since I put the main idea in each box, that's helping them get the general idea of what each stage of the life cycle is. And it also creates a visual flow for the students as well. Some additional research has been done at the University of Kentucky by Dr. Kathy Swan. And so she studied how graphic organizers help students organize and display information. So because it shows a series of events, and it enables students to see the flow of something and that it's continuous and it's always happening. Like, you know, you cut the pumpkin and then you plow whatever pumpkins aren't picked, you plow the soil, you plant, it sprouts, you know, you pick the pumpkin. So it's a continuous flow. And also by using the arrows, the students are able to see even more that it is a flow chart as well as a graphic organizer. So yeah, this is my information.